Hey there! Welcome to Board Game Hot Takes, the podcast where we give our immediate reactions to the hottest board games just minutes after playing them. My name's Tim.
And I'm Adam.
And this is Steve.
And today we're going to give our hot take on the game that we just finished playing, Lost Ruins of Arnak. In Lost Ruins of Arnak, you play as teams of explorers and archaeologists who've just discovered a previously uncharted island. You'll be exploring the island, discovering new sites, collecting artifacts, and searching for the rumored Temple of Arnak. Each player starts with a deck of cards and 2 explorers, and at the beginning of each round will draw a hand of 5 cards. And on your turn, you'll take one of the following main actions in turn order until they have no more actions they can take, because you've run out of resources. And when all players have passed, the round will end. As a main action, you can dig at a site by paying the travel costs listed on the site and placing your explorer meeple there, and you'll gain the benefit or resources listed. You'll usually pay for travel costs by discarding a card that has the related icon on it. At the start of the game, the sites only required boots, which can be paid for with any type of travel icon. But as you explore further into the island, sites may require 1 or more cars or boats, and there are also airplane icons that can be spent to pay any travel cost, and you can always pay 2 gold to hire an airplane. To discover a new site further into the island, you'll have to pay an indicated number of compass resources and the travel cost, but when you reach that site, you'll receive the benefit of a face-up idle token on that space, which is also worth endgame points, and then you'll reveal a new location tile off the top of a stack. You'll immediately gain the benefits from that revealed tile, but you'll also awake a guardian, which is a great beast tile that you'll take from a face-down stack, and you'll put it face up on that new location site. Each guardian has a cost that you can pay to overcome that guardian. If you do, you'll put that tile next to your board, and it will have a minor one-time ability you can use later in the game, but it's also worth points at the end of the game. If you don't overcome it before the end of the round, then you have to take a fear card, which will go into your deck and is worth 1 negative point at the end of the game. You can also buy a card to add to your deck. The card market at the top of the board consists of 2 types of cards. Artifact cards require you to spend compass tokens, representing that you're discovering them on the island. When you buy one, you immediately take the effect printed on them, but if you play them later in the game, you have to play a tablet resource to use the ability. Equipment cards cost gold, but when you buy them, they immediately go on the bottom of your deck, so you won't get to use them until you draw into them. All cards have a point value printed on them that will be tallied at the end of the game, and you can also play these cards as an action. If any of the cards have a lightning bolt action on them, then you can use that as a free action, but otherwise playing a card counts as your main action. Lastly, you can research, which consists of moving your magnifying glass token or notebook token up a track on the side of the board. Each space of the track has a cost to move there, but also provides some benefit and escalating endgame points the further up the track you move. You can never move your notebook higher on the track than your magnifying glass. There are some bonus resources that you can collect along the track if you're the first one to a particular space there. And when you reach the top of the track with your magnifying glass, you can then spend resources to buy temple tiles, which are worth significant endgame points. At the end of each round, players will shuffle all cards that they played and put them at the bottom of their deck, and will take back their explorers. The game is played over 5 rounds, and at the end of the 5th round, players count up the points from their cards, defeated guardians, collected idols, location on the research track, temple tiles, and negative points for fair cards in their deck, and the player with the most points is the winner. Lost Ruins of Arnak was designed by Min and Elwin, and is published by Czech Games Edition. Alright, let's get into the conversation. Let's start with gameplay and mechanisms. So, Lost Ruins of Arnak, this was, I've played a few times solo, but this was my first time playing multiplayer, and the two of you both played a couple of games for the first time tonight, so kind of fresh for all of us. Adam, what did you think of Lost Ruins of Arnak? Anything that particularly stood out to you?
Anything that particularly stood out? It's an interesting question. I was worried about this game going into it. I was like, oh, here comes another resource management midweight. I'm going to trade some resources and turn them into other resources and get some points and go at some tracks. That's kind of exactly what this was. So that's how I feel about it at the moment. For some reason, this worked a little bit better for me than some other midweight Euros. Nothing amazing here about the mechanisms. Nothing that's like, oh wow, that's interesting and novel. There's like a tech track on the right side that you climb up. There's like a little bit of worker placement. You got to pay some resources to be able to put your workers in the better spots. So nothing really pops out. What about you, Steve? Anything that kind of shines or pops out different to you for this game?
Not necessarily over other games, but there were some components that I particularly enjoyed. Deck building. You could buy from both the artifact deck, which was nice because it gave you an instant bonus when you bought it, and then you could activate the cards again later at a cost, and then the equipment cards, which cost gold instead of exploration points, and you didn't get to use them immediately, but when they came back up in your deck again, they were free to use. it was interesting how the availability of those two sets of cards changed over time. Right at the beginning of the game, you had mostly equipment available to you, and towards the end of the game, you had mostly artifacts available to you. So you had to kind of plan for that. So it's not all just like get a whole bunch of gold because you're going to buy all these cards, because by the end of the game, there's not a lot of cards left to pick.
Yeah, I think we have to spend a little more time on the deck building here for a couple of reasons. One is because I've heard some complaints about this game that people are coming in and expecting a deck builder, and they feel like they don't get a true deck building experience because the card goes on the bottom of your deck when you buy it, so you won't see it for a while. There's only 5 rounds, so you don't shuffle and draw your hand that much. So that's a complaint I've heard. I disagree with it 100%. And I'll get to that in a second. But I think that's worth dwelling on the deck building. But I think there's some really cool, unique things going on here. I mean, the fact that when you buy the artifacts, you get to use them immediately, that's just rad. It's like you're trading in some compasses for some other big benefits, other resources, whatever. And it's points at the end of the game. Each of the cards has points on it. And then the artifacts do go to the bottom of the deck, but this deck builder is such a tiny deck. It's almost like you can almost play it like a hand management game, essentially. Like you start with 4 basic cards in your deck and then 2 fair cards, which you're going to try to scrap as quickly as you can. So every time I played it, I try to get rid of those initial fear cards. Then I buy a couple more cards. That means I'm almost guaranteed to draw every card that I bought on the next round. And then the round after that, maybe I buy 1 more card, but that's going to go to the bottom of my deck, and I'm going to see that and most likely the other cards I've drawn. So even though you're not reshuffling your deck many times, you have the opportunity to basically just build this slim little, just targeted deck that gives you exactly what you need almost every round, especially if you add in some of the card drawing abilities into your deck or take advantage of them on the board. It doesn't feel like a traditional deck builder necessarily, but not in a bad way. I think it does really well. So that's my perspective on it and why it stands out as a deck builder.
So let me interrogate you a little more about this, Tim. Like if you're going to tell me what makes this game stand out as a midweight Euro mechanism-wise, is that what you're going to point to? Is that the main thing you're going to point to and say the way that it does the deck building and the hand management?
No, I think the reason that this game stands out to me is there's a whole bunch of things that just trigger dopamine in me all the time. I love the bonuses. Everywhere you're going, you're getting bonuses. And I'll talk about a few other mechanisms that I like, but generally I think that's what I like about it. I think it's like, hey, if I can get this resource, I spend it, I do this thing. But that's going to give me another resource, which is going to set me up for my next turn to do this other thing. And getting to the chance to to kind of chain those actions together and just continue to focus on what can I do to set myself up for the next turn and get as much out of this round as I can. That all of that together is fun. So it's not like that one mechanism of deck building, but that's a part of it. It's one area that you can trigger, you can kind of combo off of. I've got 2 coins left. I'll buy this thing that's going to come back into my hand next turn, which gives me an extra action. So I just think it's just a nice little piece of the puzzle that fits in really well. Could have been left out. They could have done something completely different to fill in that mechanism, but I think it works great here, and it's a fun way to use it.
Yeah, I mean, if we compare this to just from the deck building component, like Clank, right? It's got a very similar deck building component to this game. The cards are worth points. They let you draw other cards. They let you move, right? Because all the cards, in addition to whatever their ability is, they also have movement in either the boots, the car, the boat, the airplane. So you can spend your cards for movement, or you can spend them for their primary bonus. It's pretty similar to Clank, but I found this one to be more fun because of what Tim was talking about, where you get to combo the cards. You play one card, it gives you the ability to draw another card, or play another card, or take another action. So
I guess the horrible analogy that's brewing in my head is that this game is like, you could do like a burrito or a taco or an enchilada. They're all kind of the same ingredients mixed around in different ways, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? They all taste great. And some Mexican restaurants are better than other ones. I guess what I'm trying to get at is I had a lot of fun playing this game, and the way it mixes around the ingredients and uses them, it does it really, really well. And I was worried that it was just not going to stand out in any kind of way. And to me, like, I can't point to a thing that says, hey, this game does this thing super amazing.
Yeah.
But it's just a fun game. It does it, it's a restaurant I would choose. It's a midway Euro I would choose over other midway Euros for whatever reason.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, there isn't a specific mechanism that feels completely unique here. It's just, I do think that they they took a couple trustworthy, reliable mechanisms and put them in here in fun ways, and honestly thematic ways. And you were asking about mechanisms, but I think honestly one of the reasons why this game just feels fun is because of the theme that's in here versus some traditional, thing about like building up a city in Rome or totally. Trading resources or whatever. So I think the theme goes a long way in making this a fun experience. There's still other mechanisms that at least are unique enough to call out. So I want to talk about the worker placement one, of course, which is the other major piece of this and is used in a billion games. But one of my favorite things in worker placement games is when you can essentially create new worker placement spots so that every game the worker placement feels a little bit different. And Lords of Waterdeep is a classic example where you can buy a building and put it out on the board. Everyone can use it, but you get some additional benefit when they use it. This does the same thing by saying, hey, I'm going to go and explore a space and I'm going to get that benefit immediately. I don't know what it is. I'm exploring it, so I'm kind of guessing what I'm going to get out of it. But I get some extra points for going there. I get an extra bonus for being the first one to explore it. Then I get the benefit of it. But now there's a new space open for the rest of the players to use the rest of the game. And I just love every game I've played of this. It's now 5 of them. It develops differently. The resources, there's a different economy every time. Sometimes arrowheads are really tough to get to because nobody happened to explore a space with arrowheads. So you're stuck with one arrowhead space on the game. And then it makes that piece of it tighter. So I just like how that develops. Any game that does that where the worker placement spaces change, that's always fun to me.
One of the other things I liked about it that made it fun to me was that, even though you only have 2 workers, and you can move those workers around with different artifacts and stuff like that, is that you have a lot of other actions you can take besides just placing workers.
Yep.
Right? You can either work on building your deck, you can move up the research track to try to get points and bonuses, you can use your workers. The cards themselves have actions in your hand that give you an alternate action besides the ones on the board. So I think that there's just so much flexibility in terms of what type of actions you can take on any given round.
Yeah, I like that too, Steve. I want to piggyback on that. So there's just the 2 workers, and I don't think you can add workers or anything. There's, like you said, there's a couple cards that let you reuse the workers or activate an open spot. It's not about buying more workers and how you can organize those guys. It's just 2 guys, and you decide, you kind of pick and choose the right time to use those workers. It's like a small piece of the pie. You have the workers, and you have the deck building, and you have the climbing up the temple track. I like that it's, it doesn't totally focus. It's not the focus of the game is the work. There's other ways to do things besides just putting your workers out, which I enjoyed.
What did you guys think about that element of when you do an exploration and then there's a guardian, this monster that's blocking the tile when you go there for the first time? There's a couple pieces of that are kind of unique. One is that if you don't deal with that guardian, then you're going to get a bad card in your deck. But also then it's there for other people to deal with later. And if you do deal with it or somebody else does, there's a decent amount of points out of it. I have some thoughts on it, but Steve, any thoughts on that piece of it? How did you feel it added to the gameplay or detracted from it? What did you think?
Initially, I felt that the rewards on the Guardians were not worth the cost of killing them usually. The fear cards aren't terribly bad, especially if you have card removal in your deck. Then, realizing how the point scoring worked, especially that end of that last game, both exploring that spot first, which is what shows the monster, and then also killing the monster, that's worth at least probably 8 points, generally a little bit more. So the one-time reward on the monster itself isn't really the reward. It's the points you get from discovering the territory and then killing the monster. It adds some flavor for sure. It definitely ties into the thematic impact that this game
little habanero sauce
on the burrito.
Yeah, nice. I like that. My thoughts on that are, it seems like the one part of the game that's not necessarily the reward. That's the non-dopamine part, the little conflicty part almost. So it's not like the all fluff and proof and happiness and joy. But I guess if you do have the resources to beat it up later on, then you're like, I conquered this thing. It's just a small little speed bump in my path to victory and path to the greatest Mexican food salsa bar ever. What are your thoughts on that one, Tim? Sorry for to keep this horrible analogy alive. It needs to die. But.
I like it. It offers definitely an interesting decision. You don't have to, as Steve said, that getting the 1 fear card for not defeating it is not that big of a deal in this game. It's like -1 point. It does clog up your deck a little bit, but you can still use it as a travel space if you need to. So it's not the end of the world to draw one of those. And they're pretty easy to get rid of. There's a lot of ways to scrap cards in the game, so it's not terrible to pick up a fear card. And it's a challenging decision because I can spend those 3 resources to get 5 points and one tiny little extra bonus that I can set myself up for a future round, or I could use those 3 resources to move up the temple track and get an assistant, and then move up another set and get another resource, which would let me buy a card. There's definitely a trade-off there. It's hard to know at this point with how early we played, is there one specific strategy you should always pick? Do you always want to make sure that you're set up to kill off the monsters because it's just too many lucrative points to pass up? I don't think so, but it's an interesting decision point. You're giving up other opportunities when you take them on.
Yeah.
So I think it's fun. I think thematically it's fun too. I think it's just, the exploration of hey, I just explored a new site and oh my God, there's a huge spider here.
I mean, thematically it's man, there's a lot of huge monsters guarding all these artifacts. This place is pretty dangerous. I don't know. Steve, you were gonna talk about the fear card some more, or some follow up on something?
Yeah, one of the mental errors that I made in both games that we played tonight was that there are plenty of ways to scrap cards, but I was saving those uses for when I had a fear card to scrap. And if I would have just removed a few of the other starting cards from my deck with those scrap cards, my deck strength would have gone up significantly. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really think about it because it is nice to have that instant benefit and the movement. And so it's not like it takes an action to use that card, but it means you're not drawing another card that should be better by that point. So I should have just taken a few turns earlier in the game and scrapped some of my starting hand besides, in addition to the fear cards, and it would have made my deck a lot stronger.
Are there any other instant action cards than the starting cards? Can you buy some that are,
yeah,
you can buy some and they're instant, but are there some that recycle back into your deck other than the starting cards that are you play and it's just instant resources?
Yeah, I had the hat in the game, which I bought for 1 coin, and every time I played it as an instant action, it gave me a coin and a compass.
Nice.
So it's a little bit of an upgrade to the other. And I know one of them, I think one of you guys had an owl or something that gave you 2 tablets whenever you played it as an instant action. So there's a few of them in there.
When you play this game more and more, you have a good sense of what's good to scrap. Obviously, the fear cards are good to scrap, but I didn't have a good sense of what else is good to scrap. So this last game we played, I did scrap a couple of starting cards, but I did it in the 4th or 5th round, so too late to see any consequence.
I want to talk about those instant actions because one of the drawbacks to this game is that it is still pretty solitaire. It's got a cool theme. There's a little bit of blocking and stuff like that, but I think one of the biggest negatives for me is that you're just playing your own game. You're taking your actions and you're waiting for it to come back around again. They made a smart decision here because there are other games that have this kind of I do an action, then you do an action, then I do an action, then you do an action. Some of them where everything you do, it's a turn. So Imperial Settlers, if I recall right, kind of has that same back and forth flow, but you take one action and it gets you an apple. And then you have to wait for your turn to come back around again. And then the next time, maybe you can spend that apple. So what the immediate actions do is it speeds the game up just a little bit. It does set somebody up to have to make more decisions in a turn. But you're not sitting there and going okay, I spent that card, I got a coin. Now I got to wait for my turn to come all the way around. So you can, there are those immediate actions that can just set you up to do a few things in one turn and actually accomplish something meaningful every turn, basically. So I'm glad that they included that in there. It seems like a minor thing, but I think it does actually help the pacing, even with the struggles that it already has. I think it helps a little bit.
So that's one thing that was a turnoff for me was there's very little interaction, Tim. Yeah, you are just kind of doing your own thing. There's your typical resource management game interaction where, I'm the first person to get here, I get a little bonus, and now nobody else gets the bonus. Or, I went to the spot first, haha, and now you can't go to the spot. So that's about the upper limits of the interaction here. And the other thing that kind of turned me off was the time between turns, I guess, or if somebody passed and then somebody else had 8 turns or 8 actions left, you're just kind of sitting there. And it wasn't bad tonight. There was a couple of times where one of us would be doing actions for 5 minutes and the other 2 guys would just jibber jabber and catch up. But there could be some lengthy time between turns.
Yeah, I think the thing that the game does so well to me is exactly what causes that. And that is that different than other games like this, you have so many options to do. You have so many things you can think about to set yourself up for the next action or the next 2 actions or next 3 actions. And so I think it definitely leads to AP. I mean, there's no doubt about it that you could sit there and, I would say I even rushed through a lot of turns just to keep things moving a little bit, and I still took a long time. But, you could definitely sit there for 15 minutes and try to figure out, like, okay, if I do this and this, go to that space, get those resources, and then I'll be set up to kill the monster and move up this track. Like, you can really plan out what are all the resources you need for that round. So you could be sitting there for, 5, 10, 15 minutes just planning out one turn. Because you have to set yourself up for future turns. So I think all those different options, all the different variety of choices you can make is what's a great puzzle, but it doesn't help the pacing. It definitely makes it a worse multiplayer experience, I think.
Have you tried this game at 4 players, or would you try it at 4 players?
No, I haven't. And when we picked the game tonight, we explicitly picked it because Chris found out last night that he had some other obligation, so he couldn't join us. So I knew we were going to have 3 players. And I did not want to play this at 4. I honestly didn't ever think we were going to review this because I think it just slowed things down. I'm glad we get to try it at 3, but I honestly think that this game, if you're going to play multiplayer, I think it's going to shine at 2, just for that reason.
2, yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
And I don't think it's going to really take anything away. I mean, there will be a little, some less spaces opened up. There will be a little less competition on the track, but I think it scales pretty well. They take some of the bonuses away on the temple track, and you just have less worker placement spaces to go to. So I don't feel like it's going to really change the experience that much, and then you don't have to sit there and wait quite so long to get back to your turn. I want to talk a little bit about a comparison here. This game came out last year and was heralded as deck building and worker placement. That's a novel idea. Oh, but wait, Dune Imperium also came out at almost the exact same time. Yep. Deck building and worker placement. But, obviously there's a comparison to say, like, which is the right game, which is the better game of the two. So I have some strong thoughts on this. Not that I think one is necessarily better than the other. I think they're both great games. Adam, what about you? How do they compare to you? Do you have a preference? Do you think one shines over the other?
I very much prefer Dune Imperium, and it's because of the interaction piece. I like that there's a battle phase at the end of each round where you're it's almost like an auction, or you're committing your forces, and at the end of each, round of play, there's this whole little other phase where you're trying to out-duel the other players at the table and go for this goal. Or maybe not. Maybe it's your choice to just not even participate in that conflict. And just that element of that interaction between the players, so you're actually trying to get inside other people's heads and figure out what they want and how much they're going to commit, and if you have the right intrigue cards. That whole element of it just elevates Dune Imperium so much more than this kind of the puzzle, the classic resource management puzzle of using your resources to solve the efficiency game and trade things in to get points. So I like that race to 10 points in Dune Imperium, or, there's just 10 rounds, and that's it. That's why I prefer Imperium over Arnak. What about you, Steve?
Yeah, Steve, I want to hear your thoughts on it as well. You've played both, so.
I prefer this game over Dune Imperium. The art's nicer in Dune. I like the Dune theme. The combat/auction component is fun. I like games that have an auction component. It's hardly an auction component because a lot of the times you don't have the ability to bid. You don't have the ability to go into battle, or at least not effectively. So unless you're lucky or focused on the combat, you don't really get to be involved, which is one of the things I also don't like about Dune. You have to have a worker to take every action, essentially, in Dune, which I don't like because a lot of that game is about buying your sword master, buying the mentat.
Yep.
So, it is about acquiring extra workers and being able to place the workers where you have a card that matches the worker placement space that nobody else has gone yet. And it's just kind of annoying to me. That's the main thing that annoys me, is that you have to have a card in your hand that matches the space that you're supposed to play it. And this, you don't have to do that. You have to have the resource to go where you need to go, but you don't have to also match a symbol or a color or some other nonsense.
But you do. You've got the travel. You do. It's a little less restrictive. It's easier to match, but you do still have to. You still have to discard. But
the difference is that the worker placement is a much smaller component of this game than it is in Dune.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
And there's only 2 colors, really. It's water or land. It's not.
Is it a corn tortilla or a flour tortilla?
Right. So I just think it's more fun to play. You don't have to worry so much about matching all those different things. Yeah. And I know there's less interaction also in the racing, right? Because in the faction mastery of Dune, there's more racing there as well with the alliances and that kind of stuff. So there is more interaction, but honestly, I don't particularly enjoy that part of the interaction either. So really all the things I like about Dune are more fun in this game than Dune. So that's my opinion.
Fair enough. Tim, let's hear your tiebreaker, or are you going to push?
No, I don't. I'm going to push because I love both of these games, and I got a great time to compare it because I actually got a great 4-player game of Dune Imperium in on Thursday night, and then got to play this several times solo this week and a couple 3-player games tonight. But I think that they definitely shine, and this is completely player count dependent, and this is pretty unusual. The games do feel very different, so it's not necessarily like, hey, I'm in the mood for Dune Imperium, but we've only got 2 players, let's play Lost Ruins. I don't know that that's the situation I'd be in. But I don't like Dune at 1 or 2 players. I think it's okay, but I think it really wins based on the conflicts and the interaction there. And when you take that interaction away and just put randomness in its place, I don't think it's near as fun or interesting. It's still okay, but it's not near as fun as interesting. And this game shines at 1 or 2 players. I love like the puzzle, taking the time to figure out what's the best way I can optimize this, getting the bonuses on every hit that I do. But it just doesn't have enough player interaction to validate sitting around waiting for 2 or 3 other players taking their turn. So I think at 1 or 2, if I was like, I'm going to pick one of these 2, it would definitely be this one. At 3 or 4, I'd definitely pick Dune. I think they're both great, though. I think there's a great place for both in your collection. They don't feel like the same games, really. So I think even though they share some of the same mechanisms. Anyway, I'm just glad to have a chance to chat about that now that we finally tried both of them. But I think they're both lovely games. Now, talking about the theme, I thought that was funny, Steve, that you said you thought the art in Dune was better, because I disagree like 100% on that.
I'll comment on that, and it's probably largely the difference in platforms. In Tabletop Simulator, you can zoom in really easily on the cards and look at the art, and that was one of the things I was struggling with a lot on Board Game Arena, where we played Ruins, is that I couldn't zoom in on some of the card art. The token art, the iconography, and the pictures were harder to see, so it was harder to enjoy the artwork. That could just be a platform situation.
Let's jump into the production then. So we started talking about the art for a second there. It's not even just the production. The art's great. It's cool, well drawn, well illustrated, colorful artifacts and equipment and monsters and locations. But it's just something about the vibrancy and the colors in this game that, again, it's really what I want in a board game. I'm a fan of some really dry, really boring looking and ugly Euros. And I get it. I can enjoy those games because they have great gameplay and mechanisms. But man, do I love it when a game actually is fun to play and is just striking and makes me, just excited to be like kind of living in that world for an hour and a half. And Lost Ruins does that better than almost any game I've played recently. I think that they just knocked it out of the park from an art perspective. Adam, what do you think of the art in Lost Ruins?
As far as purely art is concerned, this is one of the best games. It's amazing. The color's so vibrant. The board is this beautiful, like tropical, exotic looking land with a sunset and like a giant, like Kilimanjaro looking mountain or Mount Fuji looking mountain in the background. And you have on the right side, it's kind of this waterway, this inlet of like a little, I don't know, it's like a delta, and all these just beautiful looking spots in Vietnam or Thailand or something like that. And on the left, it's the land kind of side of this island or whatever it is, and it's just beautiful. You want to go down there, you want to hang out, you want to explore and not have to deal with any of these crazy monsters that are protecting these artifacts. You just want to go in and have a vacation there and do some Indiana Jones kind of stuff. It's beautiful from the board to the card, every single card. The tiles look amazing with the monsters on them. It's something you could just spend hours looking at, and I thought the art was amazing, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I love the board art in this one too. I love when a board game, which is so mechanical, it's basically like just put your worker someplace and take some resources. The worker placement spaces are restricted based on the type of travel you have to do. The fact that they tied in the art to, like you mentioned, the right side of the board, you have to have boats to go there because it's all waterways. On the left-hand side of the board, it has to be cars. It's just cool that they managed to take they could have just put a bunch of spaces on a fairly blank board or a kind of a abstract, island art in the background, but they really made you feel like, hey, I'm traveling out. And you start out at the coastline, which is where the easy places you can walk to are. And the picture of this island, you're going deeper and deeper into the jungle as you need more and more resources to go in there. Mm-hmm. So the board art's great. And then you got those the exploration tiles that you flip over once you explore, and each of those is a unique like location or ruin that just all look really cool as well.
Steve, we were making a couple cracks about the extent they went into to integrate the theme. What are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that was definitely one of the fun aspects of the game, but also I really appreciated how much effort they put into the thematic tie-ins of the game. Almost everything you do is thematically involved in the game.
Like the hot air balloon card, like what did that? It let you take like an airplane action for free, or what is it, Tim? Do you know the hot air balloon card?
Yeah. Basically, it's a disposable. You only get to use it one time, so you have to throw it away after you use it. But it lets you take an airplane action for free and pay less to journey. So it's kind of thematic. Like, hey, this time I get to get all the way across the place much cheaper than if I had driven or taken a boat out there. But it's disposable. It's not going to hold up very long. You land it in the jungle, and it's got...
Or it's like a one-way trip, right? You just go with the wind.
That's right,
you can't
exactly.
Go back.
Yeah, the cards did a great job of tying in the theme. Like, almost every card, whether it was an artifact, it just matched. Whatever you got from it, the artifact was telling that story. And same thing with the equipment cards. I thought the equipment was all just so perfect. The dog... Right, the dog was one of the most fun things in the game, but he gave you just a compass, but also he let you take any of the base camp actions, like you just sent your dog over to steal something from somebody else's tent over there. So yeah, a lot of great. Oh, like the what was the other one? Like a camel or something like that just gives you
two cards.
Two cards, yeah, lets you draw two cards, like you're kind of exploring.
Oh, like you had the donkey and the horse or whatever you had.
The donkey, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah. So lots of tie-ins like that. I think it's. Did you agree that was a positive for it, Adam, or did you feel like they went over the...
Oh my gosh, it was fantastic. Like that, it brings you in so much. And if you think about what the name of the card or whatever, it's supposed to be an ostrich or whatever, and then the thing that it does, you're like, oh, I see exactly why it's doing the thing that it's doing. That makes total sense. So just moments like that, I appreciate when they put that much thought into a game design and they make it happen. It just brings you in that much more, makes the game so much more fun.
One other place that they tied the theme in even was with those monster cards or the guardians, and that when you defeated them, you got one little bonus that you could use later on. Most of them give you a travel bonus, so it's either like a water or a ground movement. But if you looked at it, they were usually tied to the card. So like if it was like a water snake, then basically you tamed the snake and he would take you somewhere. You could ride on him to go somewhere, or else it'd be like, the leopard and he would take you somewhere. But then the ones that would let you get rid of fear cards were these big spiders. Hey, I just conquered my fear. I was able to beat this huge spider. So yeah, I'm less afraid after that. I mean, what do you got to be afraid of after you just beat a huge spider? So
right.
I thought that was all a really cool tie-in. We talked about the board. And you don't see this when we played on Board Game Arena tonight, but with the physical board, it adds one of the things that I really, really love in games, and I wish more would do this. There's an extra little sideboard on it that kind of just fits right up to the base of it, but you could move it elsewhere if you didn't have the space. And it just has little spaces for each of the types of components. So for arrowheads and coins and stuff like that. And then there's also spaces for the stacks of assistant cards. And up at the top of the board, there's places to put the, kind of the cards you can buy from the card row. I love when that stuff's all on a board. I hate when you just have to leave like components off to the side. I don't know why, but it makes me so happy when everything has a space and there's not just clutter around the board. So I really like that. I really appreciate that they did that here.
Brings you joy when everything has its place to go.
Yes, absolutely. It sparks joy. Yeah, totally. Yeah, Everdell is a great example of that. Where like the thematically there's places for the things to go on the board, the different types of resources, but also all the cards have a space. I love that, and Lost Ruins does it really well. I'm glad they did that. I wish every game would just add that little sideboard on to show me where do the resources stack up. Everyone knows where they are and where to pull from. It works really well.
Yeah, it's nice.
All right, anything else production-wise?
The user interface, which is one of the points you usually bring up, Tim, but I thought the iconography was slick, super easy to follow along with. Maybe there's your initial 5-6 minutes of what the heck does this mean? What the heck does this mean? Oh, Duh, I get it.
Yeah, and the game comes with some really nice player aids that are on one side. It's just a list of the rewards, and it tells you exactly what they all do. So it kind of explains, that little upgrading arrow, which is one of the more confusing icons. Which explains that you have to discard a card for that other, that other icon. So yeah, it's all really laid out. The other side of the player aid just tells you what your possible actions are on a turn, and it tells you what to do in between rounds, which is.
I mean, there's really only 7, 8 different icons. There's not that many.
Yeah, it's more than you would think. Actually, if you look at that, it's probably like 15, but they're all pretty, straight. I mean, some of them are just resource icons, so those are obviously really clear. But then there's like the scrapping card icon. There's the draw card icon. There's the,
and it's what you would expect. It's nothing. It's nothing crazy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it does all work really well. I did want to talk about just really quickly that the setup on the game is quite fiddly. It's quite it's a challenge because you got all those face down exploration tiles that are all over the empty worker placement spots around the board. They're face up, in some spaces, but basically you have to randomly set those all up and put them in different places. You got all the reward tokens on the temple track that all have to be set up. And then you have to set up the different card rows. You got to put the assistants out. You got to put all the resources out. Yeah. So it is a little bit of a pain to set up. But after that, it runs really smoothly in between rounds. One of the things I really don't like about games with rounds sometimes is that there can be a lot of upkeep, a lot of like, hey, I have to do all this stuff in between the round. This one, it's like seconds. You change the card row over, everyone takes their workers back and reshuffles, takes the next 5 cards off their deck. And it's really, pretty smooth and straightforward considering that it feels like an epic ending. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going to set you up, but it goes really quick.
Nice.
Steve, anything else on production?
No, like I said, we played on Board Game Arena. It was hard for me to initially see what some of those icons were, just because they look kind of similar, and my screen's pretty small that I'm playing on right now. And I would have liked to have been able to see some of the artwork in more detail. So I'm looking forward to playing it on a different screen or
pick up a copy
in real life.
Big back in stock now.
Those would both be nice.
All right, so let's jump into moments of the game that stood out to us tonight because we want to share kind of what the experience was like right after playing. So any moments that stood out to you guys today?
So I like the crescendoing of this game. As you're getting towards the end, the first few rounds are pretty quick and snappy. There's not much you can do, but as you're getting towards the end, it's like you're saying, Tim, that just combo after combo after combo. You've built your kind of little engine, and you've got all these resources, and you're climbing up to the top of the temple, and you're trading in for this big old 11-pointer thing, and you're killing monsters. So there's a nice big crescendo. So those round 4, round 5, while they can get kind of lengthy, that's where a lot of the tension comes in, and you're like, oh man, is Tim going to be able to get all these points right now and crush all these dudes? Yes, he is. And like, whoa, what's Steve doing? What? Steve has like still 5 cards in his hand? What's he going to do with all these cards? So I like that whole crescendoing effect of the game. It does a nice job building up towards the end.
I think my favorite moment of the game was, and this is really unusual, but my favorite moment of the game was the end game scoring in both games. And I do kind of really like games that you don't know where you are until the game ends. Sometimes, I mean, some games I really like it, then you can kind of keep track and see where things are going. But I don't like it to be completely visible because you don't have to watch and say like, oh, he's got such a lead in score that I can't possibly catch up. This has enough different ways that you can get points that it didn't matter who was highest on the temple track or who had conquered the most, monsters or anything. Like, we didn't have any idea who was going to win either of the games. And the first game, we were so close. All 3 of us were within like 3 or 4 points. And it was a blast. Like, I actually stood up and cheered when it finally, like, the last, score turned over. Basically got the last scoring on there. Even though Adam was the one that won it. But I just couldn't believe how close everybody was. It was a blast. And the second game, too, same thing. Like, we went into that scoring saying, like, wow, I feel like I'm really set up here. But I don't know. Adam's got a lot of stuff. He's got a deck full of cards. I don't know what the points are on all those cards that he picked up. That ended up being fairly close as well. Well, not really.
Not really.
I ended up killing you guys on that last game. But you guys were really close. It was really fun. So as much as I enjoyed all the gameplay, I just thought that in a multiplayer experience, it was exciting to see where the points came in and how the game came together at the end for everybody. So it's kind of unusual for me for that to be the standout moment, but I had a blast kind of tallying everything up and getting to it. Steve, any moments that stood out to you today?
Not particular moments, but I guess I'll just revisit a few of my favorite mechanisms in brief. The deck engine building component I just had a great time with. You get to not only build your deck, your worker placement gets to interact with the cards that you drew that time. So, if you drew a card that lets you reuse an occupied a site that you've already visited that turn, then you pick the appropriate site that you want to use your card for. Even though there's like several little different things going on in the game with the deck building and the worker placement and the temple track, every round you got to interact with those different components in a different way, and the combos are just super fun. I've played Raja's Dice a lot since we started playing it on here, and it's just so fun when you pull off those combos, right? You plan it all out, and you hope that the card or the travel spot that you go to where you draw a card, is that going to be the one card that I need to pull off this big combo? And sometimes it's not, but then when it is, it's just amazing. And so the comboing and the interaction between the different game components, I just had a real blast with.
So you brought up Raja's Dice. What are you guys' thoughts? I think that's an apt comparison because of the comboing nature and the kind of the length between turns when people are going combo, 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 combo. What are you guys' thoughts? You guys agree with that? Disagree? What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a good comparison. I think I prefer this game just because it's a little bit more interesting decisions to make. But I love Raja's Dice. I think they're both fun. I think that's just a little lighter in weight. So I think they both have their space, but I definitely see the comparisons there. I think that's why I love both of them, right? They both have those great combos, but the downfall for both of them is that you're kind of playing your own game and just waiting for the other people to take their turns, and there's not a whole lot of interaction.
Yeah, cool.
All right, so let's ask our final question about Lost Ruins of Arnak. Would you request to play this game again? Adam, I'm interested to hear what you think. You probably the lowest on it for us tonight from what I've heard so far. So is it a game that you'd want to revisit?
I think I am the least hot on this one. If I was trapped in a room of economic resource management games and I was forced to pick one, I think this game, Lost Ruins of Arnak, would be my pick. I think it's like get Concordia out of here, get like Gaia Project out of here. I don't know, it's fighting words for Tim. But I think this is the way it presents and the artwork and the fun and just kind of Indiana Jones theme and the gorgeousness of the cards. It takes the dry out of dry resource management. It spruces it up quite nicely, and you still have that economic puzzle, the efficiency puzzle. That's a good one to solve, and they even have some like little monsters you can beat up too. So if that is the situation, I'm going to pick Lost Ruins of Arnak every time. But on any other day, no, I probably wouldn't request to play.
All right.
What about you? What about you, Steve?
It would depend on how many players there were and who those players were. Mm-hmm. I play with several people who I love playing games with, but they are too slow for the pacing of this game.
Yeah, very good point.
If there's 4 players and each player is taking 15 minutes, that is way too long. Right, it's just way too long. It's going to be an hour per round. It's just crazy, right? When we played on Board Game Arena, they had a 6-minute timer. I mean, I know you can do stuff with that, but I think that it should have been shorter. I think it should have been a 3-minute timer. In real life, that's hard to enforce, right? There's no clock automatically triggering every time your turn passes, and I think it could be a drag. But I'd play this as a 2-player with one of you guys for sure. I'd love it. And online, if it's going to be the 3 of us again and we don't have a new game to play, I would have no problem playing this at all.
Cool.
Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, I just bought it and I love that I bought it. I'm really happy with it. But it's probably a game that I'm almost always going to play solo. It runs briskly when you're just playing solo, right? The AI is easy to manage. Even with the complaints about time between turns, the game just doesn't take that long. Meaning it's 5 rounds. It's just going to move quickly. It just isn't fun while it's somebody else's turn. That's the problem with it. But the game actually runs pretty quickly. So as a solo game, it's awesome because I can knock out a game in 45 minutes and feel like I had a full midweight Euro experience, and it's a blast, and it's been fun every single time I played it. So I am definitely going to be playing it solo, but also I would like to play it more at 2 players. I think this is a game that if someone's over head to head, this would be one of my first picks. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
A couple questions for you, Tim. You don't think Jin and Danielle would be into something like this with their love for Castles of Burgundy and I get a similar feel to that too. It's kind of a solo-ish, a little bit of racing here and there.
Yeah, I'll tell you why this probably won't. I probably will not even teach it to them. And it's just because they don't like learning new games, first of all. I just taught them Red Cathedral this weekend, and it was like dragging them through like a pit of nails or something like that. Like they were just angry the whole time I was teaching, even though they ended up like I think they ended up enjoying the game and they killed me at it. I came in last in that game. But this game would just be, it's just too many different options to take. And some people, like, I like the exploration of like, ooh, what all can I do here? And I think they like a little more guided experience. Like, here's my couple choices. Let me make a choice. I just want it to be breezy and fun. And this game is just too thinky. It's got too many choices to make. It's not a heavy game because they're easy choices to teach. But I don't think either of them would actually really enjoy this game. At least they wouldn't enjoy learning it. So I don't think I'm going to get them to the point where they're trying it and playing it. Yeah, so that's my feel with them. But, there's plenty of other people that this would be a great two-player experience with.
And where does this game stack up for you with kind of midweight economic, low interaction resource management game?
Yeah, right now it's high, but, it's new, so it's hard to kind of rank. I think it's going to suffer. Like, if I'm ranking this against my favorite games of all time, it's going to suffer a lot by the player count hit. I almost never buy a game that's two-player only or a game that plays best at only two players because I want a game that has a wide experience. You can play with it. And I think this really suffers there in a major way. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how this grows over time.
Okay.
That'll wrap up our conversation on the Lost Ruins of Arnak. And we'll talk about some things that we have been playing or are excited about in gaming right after this. All right, welcome back. So we're going to talk about some games that we've been playing or thinking about this week. Adam, let's start with you. Anything that's got you...
Oath, I think it's Chronicles of Empire and Exile is the subtitle, just arrived for me today. And it's one of these ones that I am not excited about at all. I've seen a few reviews, and it might be for some people. I'm sure for some people it's the perfect game. I like Cole Worley in a lot of his designs. It looks colorful and beautiful, and I'm sure with the right group, it's a smashing success. But I don't think I have that group locally or anywhere, and I don't think I want to be part of a group that plays that game. So that's the game I'm not so excited about that's sitting just inside my doorstep right now. And as far as other games, I haven't played much besides this. So that's all I have for this week. What about you, Steve?
I had a pretty busy game week this last week. No new games for me, but I got to play quite a bit on Yukata this week with some family. So I played Therns and Taxis, I played Rogers Dice, I played Castles of Burgundy. Got to play one of my first in-person board games in a long time earlier this week, which was a game of Space Base, which I love. I love dice games, and I love the upgrading aspect of Space Base. I had a good time with that, and then yesterday I got to do another in-person board game event, so 2 in 1 week. That's quite an exciting week.
Amazing.
We played the Oceania expansion of Wingspan, which I really enjoy. I've played it a couple times online, but this was my first chance to play it with the physical production, and I really enjoyed it. I think it smooths a lot of things out in that game. And then played one of my recent / all-time favorites. We got to play a game of Power Grid 3-player, which, I think that's my first 3-player game of Power Grid. I've played 2-player quite a bit. I've played 4-player a few times, but I think it played really well at 3 players.
Steve, do you think Power Grid would make a good, would that be a good choice for our group? Is that one we should hit up on a game night some night?
I mean, I would love to play Power Grid. 4 players could be kind of slow, but if we just want to play one game and we're okay with it taking a couple of hours, I would have no problem with it. I'm not sure that everyone else in the group would necessarily enjoy it.
I feel like there's one person that would enjoy it.
Into making
the artwork's a little on the bland side, for sure. I don't think Chris is going to like it that much, even though it is very thematic in terms of all the components and the cards and the concepts being all about building a power grid. There's nothing fancy about it. There's no miniatures. There's no each card doesn't have some unique, amazing art on it. The board is just a map. There's just nothing exciting about it from an art perspective. And I'm not sure Adam would like it because it is really a resource management game at the heart of it. Like, there is a map component and there is an auction component. With the auctioning, it's really fun, but at the end of the day, you're really just trading.
Is there a lot of blocking and interaction and stuff there?
There is, both in the auctioning component and in the map construction
route building
component, which is why I really, I liked it better at 3 players than 2, because it's harder to predict what's going to happen. With 2 players, you can say, okay, that person's going to go one of these 2 ways. With 3 players, you can't predict it as much. So
it's definitely one I want to try. I've heard really good things about it, and it's like one of the classics. So I definitely want to try it.
Yeah, I would like to also. So I think we should pull it out sometime and make Chris suffer through it.
All right. Well, on my next pick then.
Perfect. Cool. Well, you got lots of gaming in this week, Steve.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy about it.
Yeah, busy week. Tim, what about you? Did you have some sort of board game night?
I did. I finally got out. Found a meetup, a local board game meetup here in Phoenix, Arizona. And it's a local game store that puts on a weekly board game night. It's a store called Funkatronic Rex here in Phoenix. I'd heard some good things about it. And it was lovely. It was, got in there. There was probably like 20, 25 people, all masked up, but, playing. It was a wide open space, so it didn't feel crowded at all, even though there's a decent number of people in there. I sat down. I got there, right as things were starting up, and there was a group of 5 other people about to sit down and play a new card game. So I sat down and played that game with 5 other people, and then for the rest of the night, I played with 3 of them for 2 other games. So it was a blast. We started out by playing a game that I'd never heard of before called Take 5, and this is a fairly simple card game. It's very reminiscent of your classic big store card games. Think of things like Phase 10 or, Uno, meaning that it's just a deck of cards. This one was pretty clever, though. It's not one I'm going to be like going back to all the time, but for a 6-player game, it was fun. It was brisk. Basically, the way it works is that there's 104 cards in the deck, I think. Anyway, the cards are numbered 1 through 104. Each person has a hand of, 6 or 7 or 8 cards. And there's 4 rows, and each of the row has a random number turned off. Everyone goes 1, 2, 3, go, and you all flip over 1 card. And whoever has the lowest card that they flipped over has to put it in one of those rows, and they have to put it into the highest number that's next to the one that they just played. In a 6-player game anyway, once the row gets to 6 cards, whoever put the 6th card down there has to take all 6 cards. And that's a bad thing. You want to have no points in the game. If you play a card that's lower than all of the 4 rows, then you have to take one of the rows you choose and you put your card down there. And then it starts basically a new numbering system. So it was really fun to kind of try to guess, what are other people doing? Here are the 3 numbers I can play off of. If I play 4 numbers bigger than the number that's up there, 2 other people might get in before me and I get stuck taking that row. Sometimes you would be like, I don't have anything that is going to win one of these rows, so I'll just play the lowest number I can so I can take a small row. I can choose to just take 1 card first. It was fun. And then the one other thing that was on there is that each of the cards had a different number of little cow heads on it, and those were the points. So most of them were just 1 cow head, but then I think multiples of 5 and multiples of 9 were more. So you could have like 5 cow heads or 11 cow heads. So sometimes you could really set yourself up to try to stick somebody with like a huge scoring hand. And you played it to 66 points. It was great. It was a great intro game. It played really brisk at 6 players. You were never waiting for anyone else's turns to go because you all played at the same time and then just sorted out how it all went. So it was fun. I don't know. It was fun to be introduced to a new game. And then I played Dune Imperium with 3 other people from that group, and then we played Imhotep, which is a game I haven't played for a couple of years. So had a blast doing that. It was a good time. But I actually have 2 new items that I want to talk about tonight too. And it's funny because they're both video game IPs that are being turned into board games. I'm not that much of a video gamer anymore, but there was a time in my past where I spent a decent amount of time. But one of my favorite game series is the Elder Scrolls series. Skyrim being probably the most famous of that series. Chip Theory Games just announced that they're going to be putting out a Elder Scrolls game. If you're not familiar with it, Chip Theory Games has put out a couple of pretty big hits.
Too Many Bones.
Too Many Bones, thank you. And I think the other one was Cloudspire. But Cloudspire was basically kind of a recreation of a video game MOBA, think like League of Legends, in a board game format. And then Too Many Bones is a kind of a traditional RPG type of game. But their gimmick, Chip Theory, is that all of their components, or like a major part of their components, are always based on poker chips. So they have these chunky poker chips, and like in both the games, like your characters, the top one, maybe your character image, and everything underneath there represents the health or something like that. So you just build up a stack as you get stronger, and if you take damage, you knock a chip off. That's my really vague understanding because I've never played with either of those series. But in any case, they're known for big, lavish productions, very in-depth games, well-loved in those series. So I'd love to see what they do with Elder Scrolls. That's pretty exciting to me because it's one of my favorite RPG series. Very similar. I think it was made by some of the same people that did the Fallout series as well. And I just love the systems in both of those. So the open world, the way combat worked, everything about them was fun. So can't wait to try that one. The other one is The Witcher Old World, is a board game that I think is about to go to Kickstarter, or it's maybe being distributed on Kickstarter. But I just saw, I hadn't heard anything about it, but I just saw a review from Before You Play earlier today and started to look at it. And it looks really fun. It's like a deck builder, another kind of deck builder with a big map board. And it sounds like you're basically building up a deck to make your Witcher stronger, and then you're going to fight against the other Witchers, so you actually get into combat with the other players. Maybe it has an area control element to it. It looks pretty cool, though. It looks fun. I've never played the Witcher video games at all, but I had a blast watching the Netflix series that came out last year, and I'm looking forward to future seasons of that. So I'm a little invested into that world at this point after watching that TV series, and so now I'm kind of interested in this game. So I probably will never buy either of these, but they're both ones that I'd love to try at some point. It sounds like you guys don't have anything else to say about that, so I guess we can wrap up.
Well, okay, one other. I haven't looked into either of those. Like I heard about the TV series, and I didn't know that was based off a video game.
You haven't seen the TV series, Adam?
No, I've only seen Henry Cavill is in it or something, and that's all I know.
Yeah. You should check it out. I bet you'd dig it. I bet you'd like that series.
Okay, I'll check it out. Another Chip Theory game. It just finished on Kickstarter. Diplomacus Victorum. Almost $1 million Kickstarter. Almost 5,300 backers. It looks like you're gladiators in Roman times fighting these crazy beasts. And like you said, Tim, there's a few different. There's a bunch of poker chips, like you said, that represent various things, like the health of a monster or the defense of a monster. And there's a bunch of different little neoprene mats that represent the different kind of combat arenas. So I saw that one was very successful, but this is the first I've looked into it. So I used to own a Chip Theory game. It was just a smaller one, and it involved a kind of memory. You were supposed to like advance your chips around this little neoprene playmat and try to remember what was under certain chips, and it was kind of like a locksmith game or something like that.
Oh, I heard about that. I read one of the worst reviews I ever read. I think was on that game. But did you like the game? Was it any good?
No, I sold it pretty quick.
Yeah, I was gonna say I remember reading a review on that, and it was just like they ripped it apart. It was not a.
It's very much a memory game, and I don't know. It was fun to like try a little bit, and like, oh, there's poker chips and a neoprene mat. That's kind of neat. And then, I was happy to move it on to the next guy.
Yeah.
I feel really unthorough for not having the name.
Yeah, they're kind of known for poker chips and neoprene. That's like they're full of those components on all of their...
Right, you could play their games underwater at the bottom of a pool.
Yeah, I didn't... somebody did a review. I think it was... no pun intended, no pun included, right? They basically took their whole box of Cloudspire and dumped it in a tub full of water to show that like nothing gets damaged because it's all like waterproof components.
That's funny.
All right, well, I think that'll wrap up our conversation this week. If you'd like to chat with us about any of the games we talked about or tell us why we were wrong about any of them, feel free to hit us up on social media. You can find us on Twitter at BG_Hot Takes and at Facebook at Board Game Hot Takes. And we would love it if you enjoyed our show or enjoy it on a regular basis. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It'll help more people find us. Until next week, take care, everybody.
Later.
Bye-bye.